the heart of Appalachia, deep where the forests grow too thick for sunlight to pierce, there's a stretch of land locals whisper about, but never enter. They call it the Hollow of Forsaken Blood, and at the center of every chilling tale tied to that cursed soil is a family name. Spoken with trembling lips, the Maddox Clan. The Maddoxes weren't just outcasts. They weren't just poor mountain folk living off scraps and hunting game. No, the Maddoxes were something far darker, something tied to a curse that seemed to feed off every generation, twisting them into something less than human, or perhaps something more. It begins with a disappearance. In 1911, a railroad worker named Caleb Turner vanished while surveying land for a new line through the mountains. His camp was found abandoned, his bedroll slashed to ribbons, his food stores half devoured. Nearby, in the mud, were footprints that didn't match any man or animal. They were too long, too wide, and the stride too strange. The company blamed it on wolves, but locals shook their heads. "That ain't wolves," one said. "That's Maddox country. Best you don't dig too deep." But people did dig, and every time, the Maddox curse dug deeper into them. By the 1930s, locals had already cataloged dozens of vanishings near the hollow. Hunters, trappers, even bootleggers, looking for hidden routes through the mountains. None returned. Those who did stumble back out were broken things. Their clothes shredded, their eyes wild, their skin pale from blood loss. They never spoke of what they saw, only muttered fragments like, "They were waiting. Not men. No, not men anymore. Teeth in the dark." And then they'd fall silent, sometimes clawing their own faces until they drew blood. You see, the Maddox clan wasn't born like other families. The curse began with Ezekiel Maddox, a Civil War deserter who fled into the mountains after murdering his commanding officer. Some say he stumbled across an old ritual site left by the Shawnee, something meant to bind restless spirits in the earth. Ezekiel, drunk on rage and superstition, broke the seals, smeared the ground with blood, and begged for protection from his pursuers. What answered him was not God. From then on, the Maddox line was marked. Children born sickly but with unnatural appetites. Generations interbreeding, not out of desperation, but by compulsion as though something drove them to keep the bloodline tight, contained, cursed, their bodies twisted over time. Some grew too tall and gaunt, their limbs stretched unnaturally. Others shrank, faces misshapen, teeth jagged and black. Their eyes lost all color until they shone pale in the dark like an animal's. By the 1950s, they weren't even considered people anymore. They were the Forsaken, a clan whispered about in taverns and around campfires. Parents would warn their children, "Don't go near Maddox Hollow, or the Forsaken will take you. They'll gnaw your bones until nothing's left but marrow." But the strangest thing, no lawmen ever went in after them, even when corpses washed down river, stripped clean as butchered hogs. Authorities would shrug. "Coyotes," they'd say, "just coyotes." But behind closed doors, those same men refused to patrol the area after dark. They knew better. And then came the Collins family tragedy of 1967. A preacher from Kentucky, his wife, and their 3 children set out on a camping trip into the Appalachians. They were never seen alive again. Weeks later, their remains were discovered in pieces. Bones split open for marrow, faces peeled away, and nailed to a tree near their campsite was something that made even seasoned deputies vomit. It was a crude cross fashioned from human arms. Carved into it, in jagged letters, was a single word, Maddox. That was the moment the whispers became a legend. The Maddox clan weren't just cursed, they were something more. Something tied to the land, bound by blood, surviving not by accident, but by hunger. And their hunger was endless. Locals began reporting strange noises at night. Long guttural howls echoing through the valley. Sometimes, they said, it sounded like laughter broken, childlike giggles, drifting through the trees. Other times, it was a woman's voice, calling softly, "Come home. Come home." If you followed it, you'd vanish. Every time. But the most chilling stories were the sightings. Travelers swore they saw pale, twisted faces peering from the tree line. Too many teeth. Jaws unhinging too wide. Fingers clutching the bark of trees like claws. Always watching. Always waiting. By the 1980s, the hollow was abandoned. No one hunted there. No one logged. No one dared. But every so often, thrill seekers and college kids tried their luck. Most never returned. The few who did came back with tales too insane to believe. One said he saw a child crawling on all fours, its head twisted backward, mouth full of sharpened teeth. Another swore he was chased by figures moving on all limbs, scuttling faster than any human should. And the smell. Always the smell. Rot, blood, and wet earth. But here's the most unsettling part. People claim the Maddox Clan isn't just surviving. They're growing, expanding. Some say they've begun taking captives, not for food, but for breeding, spreading the curse beyond their own bloodline, passing it on, like a disease, through ritual and flesh. The Forsaken curse wasn't just their burden anymore. It was becoming Appalachia's, and if the stories are true, the Maddoxes are no longer hiding in the hollow. They're moving into new towns, onto new roads, into the shadows just beyond your backyard. So the real question is, how far has the Maddox curse spread, and what happens when they come looking for you? The deeper you dig into the Maddox legend, the harder it becomes to separate fact from nightmare. But every generation seems to bring with it a trail of strange disappearances, blood-soaked discoveries, and survivors whose haunted eyes tell more than words ever could. One of the earliest first-hand accounts we have comes from a hunter named Royce Granger. In 1974, Royce went into the hollow, chasing a buck he swore he'd been tracking all season. He never came back the same. When he staggered into town days later, he was barefoot, half-naked, and covered in scratches so deep they exposed bone. His rifle was gone. His skin stank of rot. When pressed about what had happened, Royce broke down weeping. Between sobs, he muttered, "I found their home. God help me. I found it." Royce described, stumbling into a clearing where dozens of crude shacks leaned against each other like broken teeth. Smoke trickled from chimneys, though the smell wasn't wood, it was something fouler. Hanging from trees were cages filled with bones. Some animal, some not. He swore he saw children, pale and gaunt, watching him from the shadows. Their eyes glowed in the moonlight. But the worst part, he said, was the chanting. A low guttural moan, repeated over and over like a hymn. Forsaken, forsaken. The sound seemed to come from every direction at once. When asked how he escaped, Royce clutched his head and whispered, "I didn't. They let me go." Nobody believed him at first. But months later, hikers stumbled across a clearing eerily similar to the one Royce described. The shacks were gone, but bones still littered the ground. And carved into the trunk of an old oak was a single word, jagged and raw. Maddox. That was only the beginning. In the 1990s, the Maddox legend grew darker when two college students from Tennessee, Laura and Denise Whitmore, decided to film a documentary about Appalachian folklore. Armed with cameras and curiosity, they hiked into the hollow, laughing as they recorded. Their footage was later found near a creek. The camera cracked. Battery dead. The film that could be salvaged showed the girls giggling as they explored. Then the laughter faded. Denise points the camera at something in the woods bell, hands gripping the bark of a tree. The figure scuttles away on all fours, too fast for the lens to follow. The girls whisper nervously, debating whether to leave. Then, near the end, Laura screams. The camera drops. For a few seconds, it films the ground as frantic footsteps pound the earth. A guttural howl cuts through the night, and then silence. Neither Laura nor Denise were ever found. Their families begged law enforcement to search, but deputies refused to enter the hollow. The case was eventually marked as unsolved, though locals knew better. Every so often, hunters reported finding scraps of clothing resembling what the Whitmore sisters wore. Sometimes, late at night, hikers claimed to hear faint female voices calling for help in the trees, but anyone foolish enough to follow those cries never returned. The hollow itself seemed alive, warping around anyone who dared enter. Compasses spun uselessly. Trails that should have led out, bent back in. Even seasoned hunters confessed they'd walked in circles for hours, hearing whispers just beyond their lantern light. Some said the trees themselves shifted, guiding outsiders deeper into Maddox territory. But the most disturbing tales come from the few survivors who claim the Maddoxes aren't just inbred cannibals. There's something else entirely. One coal miner, drunk in a bar years later, confessed he once stumbled into a Maddox gathering by accident. He described a ring of pale, deformed figures surrounding a fire pit. Their skin was stretched thin, their eyes milky white. At the center of the fire was a massive carcass, half human, half animal, roasting on a spit. The figures tore chunks of flesh from it with their hands, devouring it raw while chanting. But the miner swore the thing wasn't just food. He claimed it was part of a ritual. The Maddoxes raised their heads to the moon and howled in unison. And then, as the fire burned low, something stirred in the shadows. Something huge. Something with too many teeth and a stench of earth and blood. And that brings us to the modern disappearances. In 2011, 3 friends from North Carolina went missing while hiking. Their phones were later recovered, smashed to pieces. But one voicemail was left behind, recorded at 2:17 a.m. It was never released to the public, but a deputy who heard it swore it chilled him to the core. First, the sound of heavy breathing, then frantic footsteps, then a woman's voice whispering, "They're right behind us. There in the trees." Suddenly, a shrill, inhuman shriek filled the recording. The voicemail ended with a crunching noise, and then silence. The case was buried. No media coverage. No search parties. Locals believed the Maddox curse had grown too strong, and the authorities were powerless or too afraid to intervene. So the question remains, what exactly is the Forsaken curse? Some argue it's just inbreeding and madness. Others whisper it's something supernatural. A pact with whatever dark entity Ezekiel unleashed that night in the 1800s. The truth may lie somewhere between. But one thing is certain. The Maddoxes are not gone. Every year, hunters report strange shadows moving through the trees. Campers vanish without a trace. And at night, if you listen closely, you can still hear the chanting, "Forsaken, forsaken," carried on the wind. But the most terrifying rumors suggest the Maddoxes are no longer confined to the hollow. They've begun venturing further out, testing new hunting grounds. Townsfolk whisper about pale figures at the edge of highways, waiting for stranded motorists. Farmers wake to find their livestock mutilated, not by wolves, but by something with hands. If that's true, then the curse is spreading. And maybe, just maybe, the Forsaken aren't hiding from us anymore. They're hunting us. The Forsaken curse of the Maddox clan was never meant to end quietly. If you believe the oldest whispers, it was designed to spread like a rot. Like a plague until every trace of light in those mountains was swallowed whole. And the deeper you look, the more you realize the Maddoxes are not a family that fades into memory. They are a wound that refuses to heal. In 2019, a group of urban explorers from Ohio ventured into the hollow of Forsaken blood, armed with drones, cameras, and bravado. They promised their YouTube audience they'd finally prove the Maddox curse was nothing but a myth. Their last video upload shows them laughing, stumbling through the woods, teasing one another about Appalachian cannibal hillbillies. What happened after that night has never been fully explained. 3 weeks later, their abandoned vehicle was discovered at a trailhead, keys still in the ignition. Nearby trees bore deep claw marks, as though something massive had raked through the bark. Search parties combed the area, but all they found was a drone lodged in a branch. Its footage was grainy, but the final few seconds are burned into the minds of anyone who's seen them. The drone hovers above a clearing. Below, in the flickering glow of a fire, you can make out a dozen pale figures moving in unison. Some crawl, some shuffle, others sway side to side like broken puppets. Their skin is stretched tight, their limbs twisted, and at the center of the fire sits a figure larger than the rest, its head tilting unnaturally far back, jaw unhinged to reveal a mouth lined with too many teeth. The drone battery dies. The feed cuts. None of the explorers were ever found. That's when locals began whispering again. Some claimed they'd seen the Maddoxes beyond the hollow crossing rivers, moving down valleys, shadowing hikers near trails long considered safe. Farmers in eastern Kentucky reported finding livestock gutted, bones cracked open from arrow. One man swore he woke to the sound of scratching at his window. When he peeked through the curtains, pale fingers retreated into the night. But the curse has always been more than physical. It's psychological, infectious. Stories spread like wildfire, and with each retelling, the Maddoxes gain new ground, not just in the woods, but in the minds of anyone who hears their name. Fear itself becomes their ally, drawing curious thrill-seekers deeper into their lair. And once you step into their territory, escape is a matter of chance, or of choice. Take the case of Dr. Henry Whitlock, an anthropologist who, in 2021, set out to write a definitive history of Appalachian folklore. He went in skeptical, determined to debunk the Maddox myth. Weeks later, his journal was discovered lodged in the roots of a fallen oak. Whitlock himself was never recovered. The journal is perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence yet. In it, Whitlock writes, "The Maddox clan is not merely human, nor merely inbred. They are bound. I've seen their marking symbols carved into bone trees, even their own flesh. It's a language of hunger, of binding. They don't just eat flesh. They consume spirit, and when they feed, they grow stronger, taller, less human." The final entry ends mid-sentence. I hear them outside. They're chanting again. Forsaken furs. After that, nothing. But perhaps the most terrifying element of the Maddox curse isn't what happens inside the hollow, it's what escapes. There are roadside tales of motorists picking up pale hitchhikers on back roads near the hollow. The passengers never speak, only smile with broken teeth. When drivers glance away and look back, the seat is empty save for the lingering stench of blood and earth. In small mountain towns, children go missing, only to be found weeks later wandering the forest. Their eyes are pale, their skin waxy. They don't speak of where they've been, but at night, they hum a tune their families swear they've never heard before. A tune that echoes the old chant, "Forsaken, forsaken." Some even believe the Maddox curse can spread by touch, or by bite. Survivors describe wounds that never heal, festering long after the flesh should have closed. Some claim to feel hungers they cannot explain, cravings for things no human should desire. If that's true, then perhaps the Forsaken aren't confined to Appalachia anymore. Perhaps they've already begun weaving themselves into new communities, hidden in plain sight, smiling through broken teeth as they wait for nightfall. And so the question becomes, is the Maddox curse a family story, or is it an epidemic? Did Ezekiel Maddox unleash a localized horror, or did he open a door that can never be shut? One thing is certain. The hollow of forsaken blood is not empty. At night, the chanting still rises, carried on the wind through the valleys. And if you're unlucky enough to be within earshot, the voices will call to you. Come home, and those who follow that voice never return. So maybe the Maddoxes aren't waiting for you to wander into their woods anymore. Maybe they're already here, standing in the tree line, watching, listening, and hungry. ChatGPT said, "Perfect, Here's a strong outro CTA for your Maddox Clan video. It's written to keep the horror atmosphere alive, while smoothly pushing viewers toward the next video and encouraging engagement, likes, comments, subs. And that is the curse of the Maddox Clan, the Forsaken of Appalachia, a family that should have died centuries ago, but instead lives on in whispers, shadows, and blood. But the question is, do you believe it's just a legend? Or do you think the Maddoxes are still out there, waiting for their next victim? Tell me what you think in the comments below, because the most chilling part of these Appalachian stories isn't always what we know, it's what we don't. And if you think the Maddox Clan was terrifying, wait until you hear about the next family name, a story even darker, even more twisted, and far more dangerous than anything we've uncovered so far. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and join me next time, if you dare. Because in Appalachia, the night never ends.